All right, let's get some reaction from somebody we know and who's called D.C. his home for decades now. Malik Abdul is back up late with me tonight here on the Final Five. First of all, Malik, I know we appreciate you representing the home team here, so good to see you again.
Of course. Thanks for having me. And what better day than today?
Exactly. I want to get your take on this because, look, I mean, we've heard the line from Democrats and from people in the city saying the crime rates are down, homicide rates tell a bit of a different story. But is this the right way to go when it comes to making people like yourself, people like me, people like at home who are watching in D.C. feel safe?
Well, let's start with exactly what it is that we know. We do know that crime is down, and one of the reasons that we know crime is down is because in April of this year, the Trump administration, it was under Ed Martin, at the U.S. Department, the USAG's office, put out information saying that there was a 25% drop in violent crime. So the question is, between April and August of this year, what has changed? Not much has changed, of course, and I think this is actually for Donald Trump. This is probably has a bit to do with the Doge staffer. Yep. Not that he's not concerned about crime overall, but the Doge staffer. But to your question on whether or not this is the approach, that is always the criticism of Donald Trump, whether or not he takes the scalpel versus the sledgehammer approach. But I just wanted to say that based on what I've seen, based on what I've read in the executive order, what Donald Trump himself has said, but also what our mayor, Muriel Bowser, said, there doesn't seem to be much change, because she pointed out that as far as the structure of MPD, that org chart remains as is, and the chief is still the chief. So I'm not sure if Donald Trump is doing something similar to what he did back in 2020 during this Operation Legend, where there was a cooperation, a partnership between the federal government and state and local officials. It seems as if that is more of what Donald Trump is doing, despite what he may say.
Something we have seen, and I believe you and I have talked about this in the past, when it comes to D.C. Council, is you have differing opinions on how the city should enforce certain crimes. And there are some that believe the Charles Allens and the Brandon Does of the world precipitated this situation by putting into place what they believe were soft on crime policies here. So, you know, what are the things the city council, did they overcorrect when it came to righting what they perceived were some wrongs that put us in this situation right now?
I'm actually glad that you raised that, because this is something that was actually cited, has been cited about Republicans. Remember that bill, and I think it was Charles Allen's, his bill, the mayor attempted to veto the bill, but they had a veto-proof majority in that. And what ended up happening is that Congress ended up basically overturning that legislation. Right. So there's things that obviously the D.C. Council should do. And I want to say, as someone who's lived in Ward 8 probably for the past 20 years now, is that even here, where most of the crime is that people want safe streets. People actually don't mind what Donald Trump is doing as far as the increased presence. It is, back to what you said initially, it is how he goes about actually doing that. But we all want safe streets. I've yet to meet anybody who's opposed to the increased law enforcement presence in the city.
You know, and I've only been here just about 10 years now, and I've bounced around the city a little bit. I've never felt unsafe, but that's just my perception. And I think when you are when you see people who are affected, they lose a family member. I mean, we've had so many young children caught up in gunfire, which is sadly something we see across the country. We saw it here many times. The reaction is one thing. What happens after the fact is another. So do you feel safe still living in D.C.?
As I said, and not only have I lived in D.C. for this long, I've lived in the same neighborhood and probably places where many people won't go. Yeah. This is not to say that I don't have concerns. You know, I'm walking outside and I'm saying, you know, a YN may come, you know, bust me upside the head or something. That doesn't mean that I still don't have those concerns, but I've never been an actual victim of crime, right. But I do know people who have. A lot of this is about crimes of opportunity. We should call those out. These teams, they actually should be harsher sentences against them, but it is not a war zone. Like, war zones are actually war zones. DC in no way is that. And how do we know again? Because the president's administration said this back in April.
Do you think the mayor, for her part, is doing what she should to work with the White House?
Wow, you are really asking all the right questions this night. I'm going to say something, and obviously, I'm not just a longtime D.C. resident. I am a Republican, and I am a three-time Donald Trump voter. I've never voted for Muriel Bowser ever, neither of the times that she ran. But I've been in D.C. through Anthony Williams, his last term, I think it was, Adrian Fenty, Vincent Gray. And what this mayor has done over the years, D.C. has become safer. Even my ward here in Ward 8. I would love for the Trump administration to go on over to Sycamore and Oak here in Ward 8 to see what people in the community, the people like the Dana Halls, who was the project manager behind Sycamore and Oak, and the people like Monica Ray, who runs the place now, see what people in communities like these are doing, because they're asking, it's one thing for Donald Trump to call where we live slums, but how about highlight, amplify the work that many people in communities just like this one are doing.
Malik Abdul, good to see you again, my friend. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And the Final Five is back after this.